Welcome back to Achieve Intentional Transformation podcast with your host, Dr. Leonie H. Mattison. It is always a blessing to be on top of the earth and to invite in and welcome the gift of your presence, your time, and your contribution. So thank you for being here. A couple episodes ago, I promised that I would dive into the THREAD thread system. And so I have bundled this 7-part series titled When the Ground Shifts. Naming your disruption and meeting the thread system. And so I'd like to start off today and invite you to imagine that we're just sitting across from each other, maybe at a small table. Right now, I have my hands wrapped around a small cup of coffee. I haven't had coffee in several months and felt led today to just finally exhale and have a sip of coffee. So, I invite your presence here with me today as we're going to dive into this 7-part series. Because this series is for the after moments. After the email, or after the meeting, or after the breakup, or after the diagnosis, or after we're going in a different direction. You know that feeling when your life looks the same on the outside, but inside everything has shifted 3 inches to the left. You know those seasons? Yes, that's who I'm talking to throughout this series. And if you're thinking, wow, she's talking about me already, yes, I am. Do not worry, I cannot see your browser history, but I do want you to know I see your humanity. Let me start with something personal so you know that I am not speaking from theory alone, and also that I'm not an AI. I am Dr. Leonie H. Mattison, and I'm a real person. Not too long ago, a decision was made not to renew my contract as an executive leader. One day I was sitting at a leadership table making decisions. The next season, I was one of the many Black women navigating unemployment in a year when our unemployment rate has been higher than the national average here in the United States of America. I wish I could tell you I floated through that season with nothing but peace and gratitude in the beginning, but I would be lying, and that's just not part of my value system. What actually showed up first was what I call the gremlin of fear. I started asking questions such as, what did I do wrong? Why wasn't my gift, my presence, my talent, my achievements, why weren't they enough? I also started asking the question of what would people think? I battled with asking the question of, at this stage of my career, shouldn't I be past this? Then came the gremlin cousins. I call them shame, blame, and complain. They all wanted a turn at the microphone, my friends. And let me say this, if feelings were a group chat, mine were all on caps. And right there, in the middle of that noisy internal group chat, another voice rose up in me. Not a gremlin this time, but a memory. I remember in that season, I could almost feel my grandmother's hands steady at the quilting frame. And I remember watching her stitch tiny pieces of cloth into something strong and beautiful enough to keep a whole body warm. I remember. In that season, I thought of my ancestors whose names I know and the many whose names I don't. Women and men who worked, prayed, resisted, and survived so that I could sit at leadership tables that were spaces they were never invited into. I in that moment remember that I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. I thought of Nelson Mandela, who was knocked down and locked away but never surrendered his vision. I thought of Dr. Martin Luther King, who kept preaching justice while the threats mounted. I also thought about Harriet Tubman, leading people through freedom and toward freedom again and again at great risk to her own life. And I thought of the countless Black women and men in every generation who were betrayed, overlooked, exhausted, treated unfairly, and who still rose. They still led, they still loved, and they still served. So while fear was shouting, my friends, and it was shouting really loudly, "Hide, Leonie, hide," their lives, the lives of my ancestors, were whispering something very different. And this is what I heard and hope you will hear today. My ancestors, I heard all of heaven and the angels saying, "Leonie, you are allowed to be knocked down by betrayal, unfair treatment, tiredness, grief, mistakes, and change, but you're not required to stay down." Let me say that again to someone who may be feeling as though your back is on the ground and you're feeling stuck. I want you to hear me now and hear me loudly today. You're allowed to be knocked down by disruption, betrayal, unfair treatment, mistakes, tiredness, grief, and change, but you are not required to stay down. You see, great leaders are not the people who never fall. Great leaders are the ones who learn how to fall, feel, heal, and rise with more wisdom, not more bitterness. And if you are a board listening or a team, and you're listening to this podcast, maybe you're searching for your next president and CEO, please hear this with clarity and care. I am not disqualified by disruption. I am being refined by it. And I am equipped, ready, and prepared to steward complex change of your institution, your team, with courage, compassion, and competence. In the meantime, I made a decision that I am taking responsibility, and I have taken great responsibility to heal my soul, to renew my mind, and tend my nervous system. And I've been doing that for a couple months because I think it's important. It is very important for me to prepare myself for where I know my vocation, my mission, and why I'm here on the earth as assigned for me to fulfill. And so now I'm sharing some of what I've learned, not just for myself, but to serve emerging, aspiring, and seasoned leaders who are navigating their own valleys and need language, or maybe a framework and company for the journey. The truth is that part of me wanted to hide. Yes, part of me wanted to keep what I've gone through quiet. Part of me wanted to pretend everything was just fine. Oh yes, there are moments when I just wanted to slap on some lipstick and a LinkedIn smile and keep it moving. But another part of me, the part that has walked through disruption before, knew, Leonie, you only truly lose a battle when you're not down and decide not to get back up. So I made a different choice. Instead of letting fear script the story, I decided to take back authorship of my life. And I turn to the very framework I'm going to walk you through in this 7-part series, which is called the thread system. I've had to utilize my own system to help me to achieve intentional transformation. Now, let me be honest with you. Before that season, I treated my emotion like spam emails. There were seasons where I used to deal with my emotions by saying, I'll deal with that later. Press that delete, go on to the next meeting, go on to the next conversation. Yes, my calendar during those seasons were organized. My inbox was color-coded. But guess what? My emotions were on airplane mode. Losing that contract, losing what I felt was a loss of a role, forced a confrontation I had successfully rescheduled for years. The grief, the exhaustion, the frustration, the disappointment, the relief I did not want to admit I felt, it all came rushing in. And I had to do something I had not done in a long time, my friends. I had to sit still. I had to feel what I was feeling. And I had to admit that strong, capable, high-performing visionary leaders was also this woman, this leader, talking about myself, was also a woman with a tired nervous system and a tender heart that needed to be tended to. And yes, it was uncomfortable because my ego preferred the version of me who always had an answer, a plan, or a strategy. But my friends, disruption will eventually ask you to meet the you that exists when there is no title to hide behind. One of the things I love about that season of my life is that in that season, I found myself drawn outside more and more. There were days I spent many hours just walking by a water fountain or the ocean. I would spend hours by the lake, just sitting quietly, listening to the wind. There are days when I was hugging the tree and having conversation with the trees and the leaves. Because somewhere beneath and between the rustlings of branches and my own shaky breathing, I started to notice something. And one of the things that I've noticed and I'm holding near and dear to my heart is that trees breathe with us. So if you haven't been outside for a long time, I encourage you to take a walk outside and just notice a tree or get close to a tree, because we inhale oxygen, we exhale carbon dioxide. That's something we learned at an elementary level, right? But here's the thing. Trees receive what we exhale and return oxygen back to us. Let me repeat that again. Trees breathe with us. We inhale oxygen and we exhale carbon dioxide. Trees receive what we exhale and return oxygen back to us. What an amazing just revelation that there's a quiet reciprocity between our lungs and the leaves of a tree. And one day it hit me, Leonie, this is what healthy leadership and organization is supposed to feel like. Not you as the tree doing all the giving while everyone else just breathes in your oxygen. But systems, teams, organizations, and relationships where there is exchange, mutuality, and shared aliveness. And I also learned during that season something from trees in drought, that when water is scarce, trees do not send out a press release. No, they send their roots deeper. And in those moments, they quietly search and source water in unseen places. I learned that during that season. I knew it instinctively and intuitively, but that season of my leadership really had me slow down and pay attention to really look closer, to look again. And that image changed how I saw leadership in times of disruption. Because the truth is, my friends, when the external landscape is dry, what I'm talking about here is budget cuts, job loss, uncertainty, or conflict, healthy leaders go deeper. We go deeper into truth, deeper into our values, deeper into our faith, deeper into community, and deeper into our own inner lives. Not louder or more performative, but deeper. And now I can confidently share of my gratitude. Now I'm grateful. But in the moment when I was going through this, I really wasn't. But now, oh, I am so grateful. I have so much gratitude to nature, who became my teacher. The trees and the leaves became my boardroom, and my breath became my first feedback tool. And this is why in this series, we're starting with you, your inner world, before we broaden the lens to teams and organizations or communities or nations. It always starts with the leader. Because we cannot keep leading from an empty tank or an overdrawn nervous system or a carefully curated persona that looks impressive while our souls whispers, I am tired. Because, my friend, if we keep giving what we don't have, that is not generosity. That is self-extraction dressed up as service. Yes, our ego can get us into the room, onto panels, or on the org chart. But only a grounded, honest, emotionally present self can lead people well. Once we're there. You cannot sustainably lead others to clarity while you are committed to staying confused about your own truth. You cannot build a culture of safety while quietly denying your own need for safety. And you cannot create breathing room for your team while you hold your own breath all day. That is not healthy, my friends. And so we begin here with your breath, with your body, with your story, with the inner life of you as a leader. And as I promised, we will get to teams and organizations and systems. We will get there. But first, we need to make sure the person in charge of the PowerPoints, the person in charge of the policies, of the culture, the person in charge of making decisions has actually met the person in their own skin. And if you're thinking, wow, that feels a little close, that's good. That means you're awake. So I invite you to stay with me. Before we go further, let me say something clearly and kindly as well. This is not a substitute for therapy or mental health treatment. It is not a substitute for medical care, not a substitute for legal, financial, or human resources advice. And this is not a substitute or a way to bypass due process if you're in a harmful or unjust situation, if you're navigating trauma mental health concerns, legal issues, workplace harm, or safety risk, please reach out to the professionals and processes designed to help you. What I'm offering here is a companion framework and a way to make meaning in the middle of disruption. I want you to be able to see patterns instead of only pain. And I also want to walk more intentionally. I want you to walk more intentionally through change alongside those other support systems. And so the thread system, I just want to remind you of what the model and its 6 movements are. T, think deeply. H, harvest wisdom. R, release patterns. E, enlist allies. A, adopt change. And D, design wholeness. The first 3 movements are about your inner life. And what I mean by that, we're going to talk about your thoughts, your emotions, your nervous system, your beliefs, the stories you tell yourself when no one is listening. The last 3 are about your outer life. We're going to look at your relationships, your support systems, your choices, your habits, your leadership, your everyday rhythms. And the image underneath all of this is the ancient art of tapestry weaving. One of the things that I want us to keep in mind as we go through this series is that a master weaver doesn't throw away a whole tapestry because one thread breaks or a section warps. No. Master weavers practice stepping back. They study what happened and patiently rethread, stitch, and they also reweave. Okay? And I want you to also see that your life is like that. Your life carries threads of joy, loss, transition, heritage, calling, disappointment, and grace. They're all woven together. And I know in the middle of disruption, change, transition, betrayal, those life moments that we go through, it's hard for us to see that. But here's the truth. When disruption happens, it doesn't just break pattern. It reveals the pattern that's underneath. It reveals the old stories, unconscious loyalties, survival strategies that now have a chance to be seen, to be examined, to be explored, and also to heal. Transformation is not pretending the break never happened. I want you to know that transformation is learning how to weave again with what is true now. One more piece I want to honor before we dive into the series. I really want to honor your body. When life hits hard, your body responds before your thoughts have time to form complete sentences. If we look at early work by physiologist Walter Cannon, who described the fight or flight response, right, as the body's built-in way of mobilizing against a perceived threat. And I encourage you to take a look at his work. And also more recent work like the polyvagal theory developed by Dr. Stephen Porges. And that suggests that the autonomic nervous system, it shifts between the states of mobilization, social engagement, or shutdown, depending on whether we feel safe, threatened, or overwhelmed. What that means in our everyday language is that when for example, your job is at risk, you might find that your heart start racing, and your heart racing is not a character flaw. Or when your relationship ends, you might find yourself feeling numb because your body is trying to protect you. or when you can't sleep or can't get out of bed or suddenly want to clean every cabinet in your kitchen at 2 a.m. in the morning. It's your nervous system doing exactly what it learned to do underneath pressure. You're not too much. You're not broken. You're wired for survival, my friends. And this 7-part series will not ask you to override that. Instead, we're going to invite your body, emotions, and thinking mind into the same room so you can move with more clarity and compassion. And so, for us to journey well together, I'd like you to pick one situation you're navigating or recently navigated. Just one. Maybe for you, it's a role that has been restructured or eliminated. Or maybe it's a relationship that ended. Or a diagnosis that changed your health. Or a move that uprooted your life. Or a betrayal or rejection that cut deeply. Or maybe it's a loss that still aches. Now, don't pick everything, please. I'm just asking you to pick one situation that you're navigating or have navigated. I know you have a PhD in multitasking, but for this journey, just pick one. And in this 7-part series, we're going to return to a common scenario, right? A major change to your role at work. As I said, it could be a personal or professional, because many of us have had a version of that experience. I want you to pick the one that feels more urgent for you, or it's a priority that you'd like to dive into before the end of the year, because we are already in December. And so I really want to help you to be able to integrate the thread system to help you to achieve intentional transformation. But as I describe it, I want you to quietly substitute your own situation in your heart. So I will share my experience as I've done before. I share that situation that I navigated. I'm going to share with you how I integrated the thread system, not in a linear way, but we're going to teach the thread step by step. And then in the latter part of our journey, we're going to talk about how do we weave this together. Also, to help you not just to listen, but I want you to work alongside. We're going to do this together. I've created a simple set of thread integration worksheets. So there is one worksheet section for every single episode. So we're going to go through 7 episodes. The first episode today, I'm inviting you to name your disruption. Episode 2, which is the think deeply step. Episode 3, we're going to go harvest wisdom. Episode 4, we're going to go release patterns. Episode 5, enlist allies. Episode 6, adopt change. And episode 7, design wholeness. I encourage you to print it or just have it up on screen as you listen to each episode. And if not, you can just listen now and then you come back and just write later. For today, episode 1, I'm going to make it very simple. It's about naming the battle, the challenge, the disruption, the change that you're currently in. And I invite you to give yourself permission to be honest about it. I've been very transparent with you about my situation. So I want you to be honest about it without turning that situation into your identity. That's not what I want you to do. I want you to name one situation that you're currently navigating. And if you go through the worksheet is entitled Naming Your Disruption, right? So I want you to name the situation you're carrying that you want to weave through this 7-part series, the thread journey, and give yourself permission to be honest about where you are in your body, your mind, your spirit, right? So if you go, let me walk you through the worksheet. Number 1, the question that I ask is for you to just ask yourself what I'm walking through. And in 1 or 2 sentences, I want you to name the situation you're carrying in this series, right? So the situation I'm bringing into this journey, go ahead and write that on the lines provided in the worksheet. Number 2, I want you to be able to identify where you feel it, right? So where do you notice this situation in your body? I want you to be very specific. Do you feel it in your jaw, your chest, your shoulders, your stomach? You know, do you feel it when you're sleeping, in your breathing? So you're going to write in my body, I notice, and you're going to go ahead and be honest and write about it. And number 3, why this matters to you, you're going to talk about that as well. Ask yourself, why does this situation matter? What does it touch? Does it touch your sense of identity? Does it touch your security, your love, your health, your calling, or your legacy? So you're going to write, this matters to me because. Okay? And then also, as I mentioned earlier, and I invite you to step out in nature. Take some time to notice the trees. Just notice nature in a whole, right? And it would be helpful for you to think of one image from nature that feels like your situation right now. For me, it was a bending tree, right? So for you, it could be a storm. It could be a seed in the dark, a cracked ground, maybe a river or a foggy morning. Bring that image into this series with you as well. And so in the worksheet, you'll see where the question is the image from nature that mirrors my season is, and write about it. And then I also invite you to consider why, because it reminds you of what. And number 5, what are you hoping for? Even if it feels small or uncertain, what do you hope this series might help you with? You don't have to have all the answers, but it's important that you're hoping towards something. So there you'll have, in the worksheet, you'll see where it says, through this journey, I hope to. Go ahead and fill that in as well. And so here is where we land today. We're going to land here today. And I want you to know that you're not the only one whose life has been shaken. You're not the only one who has sat in the parking lot after a meeting. I have sat in the parking lot after many meetings, after many decisions that didn't go my way. And I've sat in my car and I've cried. I have cried many, 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 many tears. You're not the only one. You're not the only one in the dark after a breakup or in the waiting room after a diagnosis. You're not the only one, and you're not alone. And I know maybe for you, you're thinking, how did I get here? And what do I do now? But this can be a turning point, not just an ending. For me, I chose in my own season of renewal not to let fear have the final word. I chose to pick up my thread and weave intentionally, even with tears in my eyes and questions in my heart. I chose to get up. It wasn't easy. No, it wasn't. Which is why the threat system isn't linear, because in those moments, while I was crying, there were days I had my friends on the phone. My allies were on the phone with me, encouraging me, listening to me just cry. I mean, I went from crying to bawling. Yes. You're not alone. And I want to help you to achieve intentional transformation no matter what situation life has thrown your way. Whether it's personally, professionally, organizationally, or in your community, you're not alone. I also want you to know, you only truly lose when you face a battle, when life knocks you down and you decide not to get back up. You're here listening, which tells me there is still fight, still fate, and still future in you. And so in episode 2, we'll open the first movement of the threat system. Think deeply. We'll use 3 tools. We're going to bring in the wheel of life, a feelings wheel, and a simple values and future self-reflection. And this is to help you to see clearly what has happened, how it's affecting you, and who you want to be beyond this moment, this crisis that you're navigating. For now, just breathe. And I want to invite you to say to yourself, something in me is still willing to live, to be woven, to rise again. Something in me is still willing to be the woman, to be the man that I was created to be. This is Achieve Intentional Transformation podcast with Dr. Leonie H. Mattison, and I'm so glad you're here. Let's get to work. So the next time we're together, I hope you would have completed worksheet number 1, and in that space and time, you would have identified the situation that you're going through and give yourself permission to walk through those questions and to be honest with yourself, to be really honest about it without turning the situation into your identity. You got this. You're not alone. There's a host of community members and we're cheering you on, my friends. So until next time, you take care now, and thank you for joining me on the Achieve Intentional Transformation podcast. Take care now, my friends.